This is NHTV2, North Haven Government Television, a service of North Haven Community Television. The following program is brought to you through the support of the Town of North Haven.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the October 18th, 2023 meeting of the Town North Haven Board of Finance. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Before we get started on our agenda, I just want to say that Lori Jean Hannon is unable to be with us tonight, and Mr. Frieda is not here at the very moment. We do expect him to join at some point during the meeting, probably not earlier than 7 o'clock. Let's start with the minutes for the September meeting. Any comments on the September minutes?
I just have one very small comment on the very first page. No, sorry, the second page. Towards the bottom where it says Ms. Vizicchio made a motion to accept the Board of Education transfer of 441. So this may sound like a subtlety, but I think it's important. Based upon a memorandum of understanding, the Board of Education makes a request to the Board of Finance to appropriate their surplus or unexpended funds, in this case $441,000. The Board of Finance in turn votes to approve of their request, and then it is in fact the Board of Finance that in turn approves the transfer of the money. So the way it's worded, it makes it sound like the Board of Education transferred the money and we're simply approving it. So I'd like to make a motion to simply add, Ms. Vizicchio made a motion to accept the request from the Board of Education to transfer $441,000.
I'll second the motion.
Yeah.
Any discussion?
Makes sense.
Tammy, do we have that? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. We're going to hold the old business to a little bit later in the meeting. That would include the August minutes, Mike, which I think you and perhaps Nancy had some comments on. And you do have on the table, dais in front of you, there was a request 2 months ago for a fuller accounting of the MRSA dollars. We do have those. Ingrid will take us through that later on, but I was hoping that Mike will be back by the time we have that conversation. So I think he'd be very helpful there. So, excuse me, I'd like to hold that to towards the end of the meeting. So why don't we, for now, go on to our reports, and why don't we start with the September reports. Let's start on the revenue side. My only comment for myself personally is that we got in our pilot money, and it was nice to see it was $87,000 higher than we budgeted.
Exactly. It's also nice to see that the building fees, fire fees, and even the paramedic services are all on target. Very
Right.
happy to see all three of those.
Actually, our interest is quite a bit ahead, too.
Oh, yes. Interest
yeah.
on short-term investments is also at almost 50%.
Mike, Diane, Bob, any questions,
No.
comments
No.
you'd like to make on the revenue side?
No.
Okay. Let's go to expenses. I did look them over myself. We appear to be on track, both in almost every department in the town and for the town in total. Fire department's over about 2%. We do have some of the same themes we've had in the past. We are running higher than a simple pro rata portion would suggest we'd be at on some areas. Oil and gas is actually not bad. I think it is either on target or only a couple of points higher in the departments that we have. I looked at that specifically. There is one department I'll find later that's running a little bit higher, but I was pleased to see that the oil and gas is only running a little bit higher. I guess it's fire, by the way, because gas and oil is 34% for fire. And then Supplies, building maintenance and repairs, just as we've talked about, not only in the last couple months, but even in our last fiscal year, are running higher. With that, if the members have questions they'd like to ask Ingrid, please go right ahead.
Ingrid, question on under economic development.
Sure.
Probably missed this last month or the month before. Commission expenses.
That was the Business Expo and membership fees
Okay, thank you.
for 2023.
On page 1, under election, it would be great if Lori Jean were here, she's our inside ringer, but I just wondered if those expenditures that are both month-to-date expended as well as the encumbrances, whether those are things that were related to the primary or the upcoming November election. Because the making voters seems to be double.
Doubled, yeah, I noticed that too.
I'm sorry, making voters?
Yeah.
Yes,
Oh, yeah, right.
I can look into that.
Again, it's not big numbers, I was just
Yeah.
curious as to whether this was from the Democratic primary or the upcoming
Okay, I'll
election.
check on that.
So I think there's a,
Ingrid, talk about the reserve accrued for me.
That's-
The accrued benefits?
Yeah.
Okay,
220, page 6.
That was going to be my question.
Yeah.
sure.
I know Gary retired, that's got to be part of it,
We
right?
had 4 people, long-term retirements, and they left also. One is the assessor, there was 1 police officer, a dispatcher, and 1 for the fire department for
Okay.
his passing.
Yeah. Well, the fire department
These accrued benefits.
would be on the fire department
yeah.
reserve line.
That's a separate line.
Okay. So the question with those benefits are, is it a one-time disbursement of what they would receive in this current year, or is the 62,000 monthly charge that occurred last month going to be recurring?
No, it's a one-time per person.
Yeah, thank you.
Ingrid, do us a favor too, and just comment on our water bill. Talk about the billing and why that's 0. It's on the
What
last page, by the way.
Okay.
It's on the, it's not on the last
Free
page.
water.
Where was that?
Yeah.
Sorry, it's page 16, 500 utilities.
Sure, we get billed for the water hydrants around the town, and the bill usually comes in December and June. It's a twice-a-year fee,
Okay.
so we'll see a bill around December, January,
Okay.
the first billing.
Any other questions by the members?
Yeah, on page 10, sort of building on the point that you made, Tim, about the fire department, one thing that kind of jumped out at me was the contractual replacement staffing just for the month of September, which looks to be a little bit over $120,000. And I think in the previous month it was $78,000, and even that was on the high side. I think historically it's been somewhere between, again, it varies tremendously, anywhere from $40,000 to $60,000, and this seems to be double that. So obviously they're dealing with a tremendous loss of a firefighter recently, but in a single month, that just seemed like a lot. I wondered if they were doing some sort of training, or perhaps in having, some additional assistance from other towns, that maybe we had to compensate them for that. I wasn't quite
Yeah,
sure.
I will have to ask about that.
Okay.
But, yeah.
All right, anyone else?
Not too much here.
Okay, then why don't we move on to the special funds report? we not, yeah, I was to say, do we not?
Yeah,
No.
I don't, no, I don't,
I don't think we received.
No, we didn't
that.
get one.
No.
I think the special funds might be part of that packet that we received with the MRSA.
The MRSA, yes.
Yeah, if you look.
Oh, it is, yeah,
Yeah.
okay. So why don't we hold that to the MRSA
So we
conversation?
just got it. I
Yeah.
really can't. I've kind of done this too much.
All right, then let's move on to Board of Ed, please.
Okay. There you go. I think my only comment is, again, last month, they, in keeping with their memorandum of understanding, the superintendent provided us with a good faith effort to try to describe how they might use that $441,000 of unexpended funds. One of the things that they listed was this $187,000 for capital improvements. I fully support that. But there were two other expenditures, and I don't see them actually listed here. One, I believe, was $100,000 for special ed legal funds, and I believe that there was another request as well. And so I guess it's the same thing that I said a year ago. We have a special ed line item in the Board of Ed, special ed legal fees line item in the Board of Ed budget. We also have a special ed reserve fund, which is like a rainy day fund, and they can make transfers into that special ed reserve fund whenever they want to. And then we also have this non-lapsing fund in which we've just deposited $441,000, and I believe there was a small balance. So I guess my request is, going forward, if there are special ed legal fees, I would request that the budgeted money in the line item that's in the Board of Ed budget be used first, and then the rainy day special ed fund be used second, and then this non-lapsing Fund 373 be used third. And that might be the plan, absolutely might be the plan, but it just wasn't clear in what was communicated in the memorandum.
You know, Nancy, I'm not sure that we can or can't direct them how to spend their dollars, and in what priority they should spend them. Truthfully, I mean, it's always been my understanding that we don't have the ability to direct the Board of Ed in their management of their funds once we grant it to them. And I'd be happy to check with Jeff on that, but that's my basic understanding.
Again, I think that in the cases where they're using these special reserve funds first, they are enabling either the transfer of dollars within their budget, which is certainly their prerogative, but it also sets them up for surplus at the end of the year. So again, if the taxpayers of North Haven are approving a Board of Ed budget and all the line items associated with it, I think it should be used in that manner, and that the rainy day funds should be used as rainy day funds. And we're very early in the fiscal year, so I looked at their budget. They had $202,000 appropriated for special ed legal fees. Of that, I believe that they've spent about $74,000, so they have a decent amount of money left over, and my hope is that they will utilize that first and then turn to the reserve fund second. So that's just my request.
Okay, well, just so I understand, your request is that we ask the Board of Ed on the special ed that they expend their expense line first, the budgeted expense line, then they use their special ed reserves, and then they use the non-lapsing fund. Is that accurate?
Yes, because they're asking in their good faith description to us that was sent to us back in August, they were, in addition to the $187,000 for capital, they're asking for additional special ed legal fees of $100,000 earmarked for fees associated with specific lawsuits.
I
They have
remember.
about $41,000 in the special education reserve fund, so they can utilize that. And then they're asking for an additional transfer from this Fund 373 specifically for special ed legal fees. So,
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm happy to look into it. I guess I'd remind everyone that good faith is good faith, meaning if they turn around and bought some technology equipment, maybe we'd be disappointed, but it'd be within their right to do that.
Right. And the third item is additional support services, 2 paraprofessionals and a registered behavioral technician. Again, entirely in their purview as to how to utilize those funds because they don't have any other alternative. Whereas for special ed, it seems as though they do. So,
Okay, so noted.
Yeah,
Michael?
the lapsing fund, I believe, is just a holding account before it gets divvied up into their special purposes. Is that right? Do you believe?
I think it's supposed to be viewed as a rainy day fund. And so they've kind of spelled out for us here how they would utilize the $441,000.
Once this board approved their post-year usage or targeted usage, then I think that those lapsing funds will be dispersed to the purposes that they've given us. Is that correct?
I think they can utilize those funds in ways that they have proposed,
Yeah.
and that is absolutely at their discretion. I am simply saying this money is all extra budgetary. Everything in these special funds is outside of the budget, and so I'm simply recommending that they not completely circumvent the budget, and you do that by actually utilizing the dollars appropriated for the given intended purpose first.
I would point out, all the dollars were originally budgeted, that the money got in there by being in a budget, it just wasn't spent. Listen, we have every year, we just did it back in August, right? We have situations where some line items get overexpended, some get underexpended, right? And we make transfers to fill the gap, so to speak. You know, if the town runs a surplus, we run a surplus. So, you know, I understand your point. I guess I'm just trying to say that, you know, the money just didn't suddenly appear there. It was budgeted and approved by the town and this board, and so, you know, there was a process by how it got there.
So in the past, however.
Correct.
When there was a surplus, it would not go into one of these extra budgetary rainy day funds. It would go back into the general fund. So then the Board of Ed would not have access to it. So I actually disagree with your point, Tim. I think that this is making funds available that are not part of the budget in a given fiscal year. They
Okay.
may have been left over from a previous fiscal year, but then those books are closed. So it's no longer part of the budget. This is a rainy day fund that is intended to be used when expenses pop up that they do not anticipate. And so,
You're talking about the non-lapsing?
non-lapsing, yes.
Okay, well, we approved it. Right? I mean, I don't dispute your point, but I mean, we did approve the fund, and we approved the transfer.
Yes, and
Right.
all I'm saying is the usage of the money in that fund, I'm simply saying the order of usage, I think we do have some say in that.
Well, I'll check into it for us.
Okay, thank
Okay.
you. That's
All right.
all I ask.
All right, any other comments from the members on the Board of Ed?
Yeah, the bill for the special ed, they got it in July, so
Yes.
that's why they're over, like.
Oh, yeah, good point, sorry.
I mean, that's never happened, so then you look at the narrative that they're having issues with the performance, with the transportation with M&J, and they have to, they're having meetings to discuss, so I don't know if there's any correlation, but it just seems interesting that we've not seen a bill come in July for M&J. It was from the previous school year, so of course that right away they're gonna be, there's gonna be probably an overage. And what year are they in the bus contract, do we know? We always talk about this, we haven't talked about it in a while.
I don't know.
I don't know, I don't have
Did we
to ask,
find
yeah.
out? I'm just curious, because we've also not really seen performance issues,
Right.
so that's a concern.
It's a big concern, and the way I read this, Diane, is the district received a special education transportation bill in July.
Right,
So it wasn't,
but still, like, why are we?
so
yeah.
why didn't we hear about this in August or September? We're hearing about it
About it
now
now.
in October. I
Right.
agree with you. And regarding M&J Transportation, I think that this is something that I hear about from parents all over town. There's a tremendous amount of dissatisfaction with this particular vendor, and from our standpoint, there's really a question of the value and service to our community.
And they've been doing it for a long time, so they're winning the bid, but now we're seeing poor performance actually documented, and it's a concern. So it would be, if you could find out like when this bus contract is up, and if there's any outcome from their meetings. I mean, we could ask.
Right. I know this is a high priority issue for the Board of Education, and it should be.
It should be, yes, I agree.
And we can't blame the bus drivers. I think this really
No.
is a corporate decision.
And there's a shortage of bus drivers, too.
Absolutely true. Absolutely true.
All right, thank you. That was my only
Thank you,
comment.
Diane.
Okay. Mike, Bob, anything from you on the Board of Ed?
No.
All right, I'll take a motion on the reports, please.
Make a motion?
All in
Second.
favor? Sorry, second, thank you, Bob. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. So moved. Okay, we have in our packets, and we will need a vote, this is the time of year that we get our three schedules, really. One is our normal meetings, which occur on the third Wednesday at 6:30 in this room right here. So we have that. We have the workshop schedule, which begins in January, goes through towards the end of March. We have that schedule. And then there's the larger budget-making schedule, which is sort of our roadmap to get from the budget process, which begins in a couple weeks, early November, right through to the town budget meeting, the referendum, and the May Board of Finance meeting. So it's sort of perfunctory, but we do have to vote on this. But let's see if there's any questions before we move this.
Tim, I just have one quick question on the Town of North Haven budget-making schedule. This is the big thing that you just mentioned that starts in November and goes all the way through to our May Board of Finance meeting. It just seems like there's a tight clustering at the very end of the annual budget town meeting referendum and then our May Board of Finance meeting. Has it always been Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday like that? Of the same
It
week?
was this past year. I don't remember the budget town meeting being the day before the referendum. I do
guess
remember
that's what I'm saying is.
I remember the Board of Finance meeting being the day after the referendum.
Oh, for sure, that's
Yeah,
always the
right.
case. But, because it's always a Tuesday, Wednesday, but again, we have the next week, and that's usually, at least in the cycle of when we have our Board of Finance meetings, it's the next week, so that's why I was a little surprised.
Well, I'm gonna look right now, because I'm sure I have it in my phone here. Let's see what we did this year. So the annual budget town meeting was on May 8th, Monday, May 8th. The referendum was a week later on the 16th,
Yep.
and we did meet on the 17th.
Right, and that's the pattern that I'm used to, in which you have a week and a day between the town meeting and the referendum, and then we meet the next day to set the mill rate. Because according to our charter, again, the charter was established a long time ago when we didn't have a referendum, we just simply had a town meeting. I think we have 15 days between the town meeting and when we set the mill rate. But this just seemed tight to me, it's a little bit compressed, and there might be some other reason that I'm just not aware of.
Let's just see what Monday the 7th is by chance in next year. I guess it's the 6th, but
This might be the instance of an odd calendar, much the same way as a blue moon. No, if the Board of Finance meeting usually occurs on the third Wednesday,
okay, you know what's happening?
and the,
Sorry, Mike. The first of the month is a Wednesday.
right,
So that's why we meet on the 15th, right? Because that's the third one.
right.
But actually, I think really Nancy's comment is more on the fact that the budget and the referendum are back-to-back, which I do not recall that either.
It's just that odd occurrence, because if the annual town meeting occurs
Here's my
on the
suggestion.
second Monday,
I can review.
Yeah, my suggestion is we move this, but if you wouldn't mind, check in, and you can check with
Sure.
Ellen, she knows the dates, and then just, it's probably sufficient just to send an email out to the members.
Okay.
If it's a mistake or needs to be corrected, then we'll amend it, then put it on the agenda for next month, and we'll amend it then.
Sure.
Okay. All right, I think
But to
that's,
be within 21 days of the public hearing for the annual town meeting, that means instead of the finance or the referendum moving 1 week further, the annual town meeting would move 1 week previous?
I would think so, yes. I don't know that, Nancy seems to know the dates between the meetings, I don't, but we'll have to go back, yeah. All right, nice catch, I think that's a game plan. So my suggestion is move the three schedules, and then if a change is required of this particular one, we'll manage that at our next meeting. I'll take a motion.
And by the way, I know this schedule keeps intact what's occurred in previous years where we give up 2 of our Saturdays. I just want to know if we'll be getting paid time and a half for the service.
If there's any chance you could show up to a meeting on time, you might just get that time and a half. With that segue, I'll take a motion.
I'll make a motion.
Second, please.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you. The meeting schedules are approved for the upcoming calendar and budget year. Okay. Next item on the agenda is the responses to the RP for the appointment new order, which I am going to let Ingrid handle. But before I do, let me cover one thing. I got to find it there. Here we go. So I did get from Joe Centofanti and PKF O'Connor Davies some correspondence. I think I recall getting this in the past, and I'm sure Rich got it too. One of the documents essentially just asks either the entire board or asks me to ask the entire board the following 5 questions. All of them have to do with fraud. It's really just yes or no. I'll just read them, and we don't need to vote on it, but I just need to return this back to Joe. Question 1, are you aware of any actual instances of fraud within the town? Do you have any reason to suspect fraud may be occurring within the town? Have you received any communication from employees, former employees, regulators, residents, or others alleging fraud? Have you seen any changes in employees or management behavior that would lead you to be concerned that fraud may be occurring? And question 5, are you aware of any related party transactions that occurred during the period of July 1 of 2022 through June 30th of 2023, or have any concerns about any known related party transactions? So personally, my answer to all those questions is no. If the board members think differently, please speak up, and Ingrid, if you wouldn't mind commenting as well.
Yes, it's no, I'm not.
Right, so you're not aware of any instances of fraud?
No.
Right. Okay.
I don't remember us ever reading.
I'm guessing Rich.
We do
I
get
don't-
asked that every year.
Yeah, we get asked that.
within
I'm
these
guessing
meetings.
Rich, because it does say, I think, that the chair could return it on behalf of the
Okay.
members, but.
Yeah, I don't think we discussed it, I don't recall it.
All right, so, not hearing anything, I'll sign the letter and return it to Mr. Centofanti. By the way, he gave us a completion date on cover letter of February, March. All right. Evening, Mr. Frieda.
Good evening, folks. Sorry, I was all over the town, different events that I had to attend representing the town, so sorry I'm late.
We're just about to ask Ingrid to cover item 3 on the agenda, Mike, which is to give us an update on the RFP that went out for the a request for a proposal for the appointment of our new auditor.
Sure.
Yeah.
So we sent it out to 5 firms, and we also posted it in our town website. We got back 1 bid, and the bid is for CLA. Their proposal is from 2024 to 2028. They're a very large company with 60 years in business. They serve about 42,000 4,200 municipalities, including 54 here in Connecticut. They have about 500 employees. And they
Ingrid,
have a designated team, yes.
no, I'm
sure.
sorry, I apologize. Go ahead, finish up, go ahead.
And they have a designated team for their proposal for our audit.
Ingrid,
you-
could you tell us the full name? You gave the
It's
acronym.
Clifton, it's
Sure,
Clifton
it's,
Larson.
Clifton Larson and Allen LLP out of West Hartford.
Can you, do you have the name of the other 4 firms that we sent the RFP out to?
I will get them for you, I don't have them here.
Did we send it to McGladrey, do you know? They were our auditor previous to this.
I'll have to look into that.
Okay. And do you have any thoughts, comments, reactions on why we only got 1 bid?
Oh, I
Yeah.
can
Oh,
jump in.
sure.
So, this is something we're directly involved with here. So what's happening in the auditing firms, a lot of these auditing firms aren't taking on new clients. They have a difficulty in getting accountants. I don't know if you've read some of the information about accountants. It's a profession that is, a lot of young people in college are not going into it. The starting salaries are low, about $56,000 a year. So what we're seeing is that not only us, but other municipalities, we're not able to get the 2, 3, 4 bids anymore. But we're grateful that this company bidded because they have a lot of critical mass. They do 40-something thousand municipalities across the United States, and they will have a dedicated team for us. So I think we're gonna have the resources here. So they're one of the large firms that has the aggregation of employees. They haven't had a defection of accountants. They seem to have a lot of longevity in their firm, so that's what's happening in this industry.
Ingrid, could you just comment on the bid price, please?
Sure. Their starting bid for year 1 is 98,000, and in year 5 it increases to 119. So, do you want me to tell you every year how much?
Unless the members, do the members like to hear that?
Yes.
Sure. Year 1 is 98, year 2 is 103, year 3 is 108, year 4 is 113, and year 5 is 119.
And could you just tell us how much we've contracted Mr. Centofanti for the current fiscal year?
He charged 22 the same that he did 23, 78,450. They did comment that they are going to have more staff here, more training, a lot more resources, and they are bigger. Most of the the municipalities that they audited, they all got awarded for GFOA standards.
Do we normally contract, when we first, when we get a new auditing firm, is it usually for 3, 4, or 5 years?
4 years.
4 years usually, yeah. And you gave us 5 years worth of,
24, 25,
4 with an
26,
option for a
27,
fifth?
28.
I thought it would be 4 years.
1, 2,
98,
3, 4, 5
103.
years, yeah.
5.
I'm sorry, the contract was for 5 years.
It'd be for 5
For,
years.
for Joe's. So this is for 5 years as well. From 2018 to 2022, that was his contract, and we extended out for 2023.
I think it was extended twice, wasn't it?
No, he's not doing 24.
No. Wasn't it extended last year
Yeah.
and this year?
No, his contract was up to fiscal year 2022. The year that we just had the audit, and now we're gonna do 2023. He's currently doing 2023, but he's not going to do 2024.
I see.
I think the members know that, probably recall that back in the spring, we had a conversation here at this meeting about Joe's contract for the next year, and we were under pressure because there was a state deadline that we had to notify the state by, I forget, it was March 15th or April 15th, one of those dates of our order. So, you know, we extended Joe's contract, or I should say his firm's, for 1 year. So I had asked that this be put on the agenda for October, just to give the board plenty of time to, you know, to think about what to do here, who to sign, and not be rushed like we were in the spring. So, you know, we've heard what Ingrid has to say. I'm assuming the RFP response date is now passed, right?
Yes.
Okay. So I guess when I first heard about it, because I was made aware of this late last week, I was disappointed that we only got one bid back. I do like some of the things we heard, because, I mean, I haven't dealt with our current auditor like Ingrid has, or Rich, or the staff, but it's always seemed to me to be just one person. It seems like Joe always did this on his own, and it's a big job, and maybe the fact that he was the only resource is why it lingered so much this past year, and none of us are happy with that, that's for sure. There are less firms doing this. I guess the question I would ask of the board, and maybe even Ingrid or Mike, is, you know, does it make sense to try and rebid it? Will we get any additional bids in that, you know, we can be able to consider?
I think that if we rebid, we'll have a chance of CLA not bidding again.
That's what I was thinking.
Why does
And
that
then we'll
happen?
have no
Yeah, because they're
bids.
going to see that we're going out to bid.
Right,
and-
or they can increase their
Yeah.
prices too.
Yeah, that sends a message to them. That's what I
Right.
was thinking too.
Who do
And
we?
they are, I would say they are a very good company. If we wouldn't have,
Yeah.
if we were doubtful of the company that bid.
So
they're a great
they must have named other towns that they do business with in part of the reference
Yes,
package, right?
They do 54 Connecticut municipalities.
So I suppose we could do a reference check, right? We could call some that we might know and get a reference check.
Guilford, Mansfield, Oline, Tallinn, Wolcott, Waterford, Westford, East Hartford, Enfield, Groton, Norwalk, Bristol, Meriden, Cheshire, Torrington, Plainville. There's a lot.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, we could
Out of
contact
the
Guilford.
102 municipalities, I think, in Connecticut, they do have. And they all have great standards.
Do we have a deadline to respond?
I don't know.
We gotta be careful.
Yeah, but that's what I'm
Right.
thinking. We got to be careful. If we wait another month, they might be like, we have other people, and
Right.
you snooze, you lose kind of thing.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I would, depend on what the board decides to do. I mean, I would think you could say, listen, we got your bid, we got strong, we got reaction from the board. They want to get some reference checks and make a decision next month. I mean, I don't know if that would hurt us or not, but I don't know why that
It might.
the contract wouldn't be started for, you know, a year from now.
Yeah, now previous to O'Connor Davies, did we use McGladrey?
We have McGladrey, and then prior to
McGladrey.
that, we had a small Woodbridge firm, Mike, whose name escapes me.
Yeah.
We'd had that small Woodbridge firm forever.
I'm surprised that neither of those two wanted to reacquaint themselves with us.
I don't know if we sent it to the small firm. I'm not even sure if they're still around. One of those smaller firms got bought up, as you may know. McGladrey, we probably sent it to them. I'm guessing they probably just didn't respond.
I will find out who we
Yeah.
send it to.
Maybe if you wouldn't mind, because I know you have another email, could you just include the email, tell the members what 5 firms we sent out the bids to, please?
Sure.
Along with that was with the bus, right?
So are we going to wait till next month, or?
I guess I'd like to hear from the other members, see what they think.
Well, I think if we were to rebid, they may get the message that, you know, we're not interested, or they could either increase their bid or not bid at all. I think Ingrid was right with that assessment.
Well, if we get references and they're good, I would be okay personally with you and Mike making that decision if you call and get some references. I would be
Well, okay.
fine.
All the people on that list.
Yes.
At least more than 3/4 I know personally, so I can make some calls. But I can tell you this, I know this firm, I know of them, I don't know them. They're a very good firm.
Yeah, I've heard them too.
Does the annual cost, I thought in past years it almost went down in that most of the work is entailed in just familiarizing themselves with our finance department.
Didn't you just show me Joe's, what was Joe's,
It did not went down.
was it
From-
flat or did it go up?
It went up, 72, 73, 75, 76, 78.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
You're speechless. Let's take note of that.
Yeah, we do approve an auditor at some point,
Yep.
and so it's either gonna be this month or next month.
Why don't we do this? Why don't you, or Mike, if we could, let's just get some reference checks, okay? And let's make sure we ask about the quality, but obviously the timing, responsiveness, the number of people that they're able to put on it, because I think that hurt us with Joe and his firm, right? And then,
I'm sorry, in his proposal here, they do have a dedicated team of 5 people, 6 people. That
Right.
will,
no, I'm just saying we call the for references,
Sure.
just make sure that
Yes.
that's what they got, right?
Okay.
That, you know, that what was promised is what they got, right? And then, let's put it back on for next month, but I guess before I want to wrap this up, I just want to make sure for the members there isn't any other information they'd like to hear, because I do think we can't extend this too long.
No, I'm just mostly, I'm concerned about the quality of reporting publicly to a board like ours. Their ability to communicate clearly and to interact with any questions or misunderstandings a board like ours may have.
sure.
So that's a characteristic that I would like to just have verified in terms of how a town felt that they were able to publicly report on their findings.
And Ingrid, I guess what I would say, just to give you a little direction, is if you hear from them or you feel that there's some follow-up, I think it's safe to say that, you know, we've gotten their RFP. It was, I'll use the word favorably, heard by the board, but we want to do some reference checks, and we expect to take formal action at our next meeting.
Sure.
And both in the references and in anything that they put in writing, I would love to have some sort of assurance of our primary concern, which was really the timing of their deliverables, and that we have some assurance that it's a little bit more timely if we were to go forward with them.
Two things. My thought wasn't that we were going to ask them for references. My thought was we already got the references that we would
Right.
check with the towns.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
I meant
Okay.
when Mr. Frieda speaks with,
Yeah.
people at our towns,
Mhm.
were you pleased with
Yeah.
their deliverables in terms of both the quality and the timeliness?
I'm assuming the
Very
RFP had a question about the timing of the receipt of the capital. I'm sure that, do you happen to know offhand, Ingrid? I mean, the normal,
Sure.
as far as I know, the state requirement is December 31. I mean, you can get extensions, which is what we got this past year. And we have gotten them before, they just have never generally dragged to June. We've gotten them for January, and that's never been a
Several
problem.
extensions, yeah.
So maybe that's a question, if you don't mind, in general, have they met the state requirement for delivery?
Yeah,
I think
I'm
that's a
sure.
fair question. Okay.
Once again, did our deadline expire for the original RFP?
Yes.
I think she said yes.
So we got one. So at this point, we're either deciding to accept this one firm or to possibly take the chance of losing them and rebidding the process. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Any further conversation on this matter? All right, before we go to public comment, we did skip old business. I do want to talk about MRSA. Ingrid's going to take us through it, but Mike, we got some redraft of the minutes
No, I just put a, I didn't think they were in the packet.
No, they're not. No, I'm just saying, you gave them to me. Tammy gave them to me. So, this is on the, this was the August minutes, right? There was a request on the 441 that Nancy referenced earlier, to insert the words at a certain portion of the minutes saying pending future Board of Finance approval. I think that was actually my suggestion, and I don't recall, but somebody asked that we insert some language, and I'll read it in a moment, making this statement that our revenue was short partially because we had mistakenly included federal ESSER funds, which end up going to the Board of Ed. So I will pass this around and I'll read it first. But these are the proposed changes for the minutes. So that particular piece states, despite the recognition of the full budgeted grants for municipal projects line item that brought in $2.2 million, revenue fell short by $869,012 due to the mistaken inclusion of federal ESSER funds. So I'll pass it around.
I don't need to see it. To me, that explains the situation.
I thought it was fine, Mike, but,
Yeah. I'm okay with that.
I don't need to see.
okay, so I think we approved this last time, and I don't think we need to reapprove it. I think it was just, yeah.
Right. We would just further amend it if we didn't.
Yeah, okay.
We didn't like the way it was phrased.
All right, so let's make that the...
Hold on, I don't agree with that. So we had talked about this for sure, and that there was absolutely an error in including ESSER 2 and 3 in the budget as sources of revenue. And as I mentioned, that was more than compensated by additional revenue that was brought in. I believe that the actual surplus was impacted by 2 omissions from the budget, and only one of them is actually listed here in our minutes, and that is the 57.5% collection of the total cash surplus. The other omission was the accounting of the BOE unexpended funds, in which it is recorded as 0. And that is not reflected here. So as we all recall, back in August, the Board of Ed gave us a memorandum that said there was $441,000 worth of unexpended funds, but then they provided us with their Munis report, that said that the Board of Ed, had transferred the money, so therefore their balance at the end of the year was 0. And so I made the point that you can't have it both ways. It's either a surplus or it's 0. If it's a surplus, we can vote on it, and if it's 0, we have nothing to vote on. So I don't think that the error in including ESSER in the budget was the reason that we wound up with the numbers that Mr. Frieda reported at the town meeting.
I'm sure my memory's a little taxed here. I don't see the minutes as a debate over someone's views in the budget. It's a way to memorialize what was done here at the meeting.
I agree completely.
Right.
So it's one or the other. Either we're just going to have a snapshot of what we discussed back in that month, or it is that information with the overlay of the document that was provided to us as soon as we walked in the door at the September meeting, which was that 2-page sheet showing Mr. Frieda's estimate of $184,000 surplus. So it's one or the other. It can't be half.
So maybe you could repeat, for my sake at least, and maybe the rest of the boards, what your suggestion is in the minutes. And I need to be specific because Tammy eventually's got to put this down on paper.
Mm-hmm. So I agree with what's included here. Ms. Barrett made a motion to further amend the minutes to include this, the $184,000 was also due to the decision to only collect 57.5% of the total cash surplus. That I agree with, because that's one of the 2 issues. The other issue.
Yeah, but that's the September minutes. We were talking about the August minutes. The changes that we just, verbally agreed to, were found acceptable, were the amendment for the August minutes.
Okay.
Mike is right.
So if you're saying you want to make changes to you were saying you want to make changes to September minutes, or that you don't agree with the August minutes?
So we're going back to the August minutes and further editing those. Is that what?
We had
What's-
conversation about it last month.
Mhm.
We agreed on some changes, and,
And this
We did-
wording is accurate to what we agreed
right,
on.
exactly. So I'm just reporting that this is what Tammy has crafted up to be the official minutes from that meeting.
Um, Do we think that it is due exclusively to the recording, the mistaken inclusion of the ESSER funds?
No, it's the.
That's one of the things.
Right, the balance, in the end, the balance is caused by numerous factors, hundreds of factors.
Yes.
But those were the ones that I thought were worthy of highlighting in the minutes for the August meeting.
So I think my only addition would be in the second to last line, due in part to the mistaken inclusion of the federal ESSER funds, and then I'll be fine with it.
Okay.
Mike, just write that in, please, and give it to Tammy.
Sure.
Yes.
Okay. All right, thank you. All right, finally, I think finally, 2 months ago and other times in the past, there's been a request to bring forward the MRSA special funds, which we had not been getting our monthly reconciliation for maybe as far back as when Mr. Minkowski passed away. So I do know that Ingrid has done a substantial amount of work on that. She has provided us with an overview, and I would ask her to please walk us through that.
Sure. So your first spreadsheet that you see is a more detailed overview, and then if you go to the second page, that's just a summary of every year. I'm just running through before I go through it. And then the next 3 pages are the special fund accounting that you, as a board, receive in fiscal year 21, 22, and 23. Just so we can follow the first page. So if we start with fiscal year 2021, we started with a beginning balance of $2,113,837. And then that year, we received MRSA revenue of 1.8. What you see in the first line where it says expenses per MRSA special fund sheet, that matches to your first, for June 30, 2021. And then you can see in there that we had in the MRSA fund expenses of 1.3 million, and we also have some other waivers as expenditures. That year we had a truck. And so for our total MRSA expenditures that year, we had a $1,700,011. And so that brought us to an ending balance in 2021 of 2.2. I will go back to 2021 later. For fiscal year 2022, we started with the 2.2. And we had a 2.249 MRSA revenue. For that MRSA fund, and our special funds report that you guys received for that year, we'll see the $995,000 in expenditures plus all other waivers and expenditures that we had out of that MRSA fund, and that was 1.4 million. We also received in our general fund 1.8 million, and that brought us to an ending balance of 1,152,000. We go to fiscal year 2023, starting balance of 1.1. We received MRSA revenue of 2,249. We had, we did not put any expenses into our MRSA fund that year from our special revenue sheet, but we did have 3 encumbrances. These 3, 2 encumbrance, 1 encumbrance and then 2 expenses for waivers as well. And then we also transfer into our general fund as a revenue item, the 2.249. And then we'll see an adjustment that was just encumbrances. The $8,000 are encumbrances that came under, so we got money back for that. And the 2021 auditor adjustment, we did not, when Mr. Sankowski passed away, we did not have that in our books. And when we did the audit for 2022, that's when Joe picked it up that it wasn't in our books. It was just catch-up accounting and of that fiscal year, so we did that adjustment then. So that's why it doesn't show in 2021, it shows in 2023.
So Ingrid, just to clarify for the board,
Sure.
that particular entry, had it been done in a timely manner, would have been on the same line
As
under
fiscal
expenditures
year.
general fund, same line as the 1860 and the 2249, right?
Yes, as the
Right.
general fund, right.
Yeah, expenditure
That
general
would have
fund,
been that
right.
adjustment. Would have been
Okay.
there.
All right. And we had, as of the end of the year, 76,000 plus.
As an end of the year, fiscal year 2023,
Right.
we have an ending balance of $76,000.
All right, before I ask the board for questions or anything else on this before that one, you want to go through?
No, I'll take any questions.
Okay. All right, members, any questions for Ingrid on the MRSA monies?
In 2021, we were still using the old system for recording MRSA expenditures, in that they were recorded as negative expenditures. Correct. So how do we account for that in fiscal year 2021?
That was where you see the expenses in MRSA. That is your expenditures. It will show month by month in here. Those are how we counted for those in the fund.
That's the one.
We expended that money in the
That's
fund.
it, from the MRSA sheet.
We are talking about 2 different funds, our MRSA fund and our general fund.
Right.
Yeah, that was expense out of our MRSA fund.
But I
It
don't,
was-
I don't mean that it was an expense, but that it was recorded as a negative expense.
Right, they took it out of they charged it off the general fund and then charge it to our MRSA fund, the expense.
Maybe I can help, and hopefully I'm right. I'm assuming that there's a little bit difference in the way we handled it
Yeah, there's a
internally
couple
on our
of
monthly
accounting.
reports versus the way gets handled for GAAP at the end of the year.
Yes.
That's exactly right.
Right.
And the expenditures, general fund for 22 and 23, that is money taken from,
That is money that we budgeted as a revenue item and we received it in as a general fund. So those expenses, as long as they are compliant with streets and roads and the requirements, they are okay to be received as a revenue item.
I see.
I'm pausing because I know this has been a subject of a lot of conversation, so I want to make sure the members have enough time to think this through and ask whatever questions they'd like. Go ahead, Mike.
Go ahead.
Yeah, of course, just to be clear for us and the public, the MRSA is now called Grants and Aid, but we are going to, I think, for purposes of conversation here, business here, just retain the MRSA, an acronym. Yeah, not that anything needs to be changed in your handouts here, which the first 2 pages are, really do illustrate year by year what's happened. And I want to thank you and the department for attempting to illustrate what happened here. I think it's overall it's excellent. The line way down near the bottom, at the top of the bottom there, says expenditures GF. The way I look at that line, it would be budgeted revenue expended. So MRSA, when MRSA comes in, it's not an expenditure. It's a revenue item that we either decide to apply and utilize or not. So I would have, just for clarity purposes, I would have termed that something similar to budgeted revenue utilized.
Sure.
And we did utilize, well, for some reason, these choices were made, and I must say, to some extent, I kind of agree with the beneficiary effect. The beneficiary effect, there's 2 good things about the utilization of $2.5 million more than we had previously known about on this board. Because our special revenue reports never showed 2 things that happened on this sheet. One is the $705,000 accounting move that was made in 2021, that's listed in the 2023 column here. And that's one thing that occurred. And the other item that occurred that we didn't know about was the full expenditure, full usage of the MRSA money, of $1.86 million of MRSA money in 2022. We had previously known about all of the MRSA money that was used in the expense sheets that were given to us in 2021. That's $1.355 million. In 2022, it's $995. And for the equipment that was purchased on waivers in 2021 and 2022. All of that showed up in our monthly reports, and that's good. But what did not show up was the 705 change made in 2021 and the 1.86 additional money from MRSA that was put toward the budget in 2022. All right, so that adds up to $2.5 million, and that's why instead of our last report of MRSA fund balance being close to $3 million, it's now $76,187. At least it's positive. It's nice that it's a positive number instead of a deficit.
Yes, I did wanted to add to that. I did ask today the June 30 report that we got, she only reported revenue. There was no expenditures because we were tying out that account.
I know.
And for your 2021 $705,000 adjustment, Mr. Santafani presented that in when he presented the CAFR that year, and I also attached in the last page.
Yeah, I know, and that's where the source of these changes that occurred that we previously were not notified about or were unclear about. The role of the auditor. Somehow I thought the auditor, the annual audit, was just to observe and evaluate the quality of the reporting of our financial statements. I mean, it is nice if we, from a financial professional viewpoint, if we do get recommendations to make changes that will improve our financial health or the financial well-being of our town. But I really thought that they commented mostly on the quality of our our risk limiting procedures, and to give us those sort of recommendations. But obviously, I think that the auditor went a step further and made recommendations to the finance department that do have an upside, by the way. Losing that $2.5 million, that didn't get lost. That ended up moving in or increasing our general fund. So if one of our objectives that Mr. Frieda has mentioned in the past is to solidify and increase our general fund so that the rating agencies will take a better look at our town, and our town will be seen as stronger and more healthy, then this is a step. I've actually recommended something like this happening, is utilizing our full allotment of MRSA money toward the budget to increase the surplus at the end of the year, or to diminish the amount of fund balance that we had budgeted toward a given year, and then it stays there, and it becomes unrestricted. Instead of restricted funds in MRSA, it becomes unrestricted funds in the general fund balance. I say unrestricted; it still would have to be approved by the town in terms of whether we wanted to use it for capital or other purposes. But it just becomes unrestricted in the scope of what the possibilities would be. So I'm saying that there is a silver lining to this revelation that you've given us.
Thank you, Mike, for your comments. That will be a nice segue, but I don't want to rush things. Any other comments, questions on this particular item before we move on to one final piece of business?
Does Mr. Frieda do you want to comment on this at all? This is a big change.
Well, it's for the better, and it's going to eliminate all the confusion down through the years we've gone through on this board. So I think you've made some good points here, and I agree with them. And it is a segue into something else I'd like to talk about.
Go ahead, Mike.
So this past week, I've been tied up because of the S&P 500 rating call. So we had a very long rating call, and as it unfolds, I have to profile the town, put a slide presentation together, and I'm happy to report that we have been renewed as a AAA municipality. Now, with that being said, I learned something in this call, and there is a cautionary tale, and it's the same thing I've been talking about for the last 3 or 4 years, that we have already memorialized the fund balance policy. But this past year, while we still score among the highest in our peer group of AAA municipalities across the country on economic development, we are now dropped even lower on the fund balance side. So what I learned on this call was that the rating agencies are really looking for a 15% fund balance as a minimum. Many of the top peer AAAs are at 20%. Now we moved from 8.23% to 8.91%, which showed some movement. So what I'm doing now with our finance department is we're going to be getting templates of some of the peer municipalities that are AAA rated and get their fund balance policies. We're going to come back to this board. It's going to be my opinion, it is my opinion, and we're going to have to redo that policy we have to bring those rates up. Now, what does this mean for the general public? Well, when we went out after we had that town meeting, we ended up going out, we did a rating call, which we got through. We borrowed the money, and we came in at 3.93%. The bond counsel for us was shocked, as was Munistat, who handles the internal going back and forth in terms of borrowing this money. They go out to bid, We got many people that bid on our paper, so to speak, and they really thought it was gonna come in higher. So the value of AAA is that we got probably the lowest rate that we could have possibly gotten. The consequences of not being AAA are that when we borrow to improve the town's infrastructure, it's at a much higher interest rate. So I'm gonna tell everybody point blank here tonight, ladies and gentlemen, that in the past, the higher the fund balance, there was always someone who would say overtaxation. But we're gonna have to shore this fund balance up, because Mike Frieda's economic development has carried us through, but next year, if we have to go out to bond, if we don't show something more in that fund balance, that's the cautionary tale here, folks. So I'm gonna come back, we're gonna show templates, we're gonna show examples of other AAA municipalities, specifically on the fund balance. Everything else in this town, from a financial standpoint, the rating agencies are thrilled with the way this government is being run financially. But this fund balance continues to emerge as an Achilles heel for us. And that's the situation.
Thanks, Mike. And I guess it's just some information for the board members. Keep in mind, and there's different ways we can accomplish this come budget time next year. I know the members are aware that historically we've rolled over our surpluses from the prior year into the ensuing year. There's probably a way that we could even insert a line item, to build the fund balance in the budget itself. And there may be other ways, but it's, I think, something that we need to keep in mind. And Mike, by the way, I said this, I think, last meeting, I see a lot of fund balances in my daily work from other municipalities, and Mike is right. And I've noticed the trend, too. I mean, we all used to assume, not assume, but 8% was sort of the number, right? Maybe 8 to 10, but 8%, and it's definitely trended up. So, thank you, Mike. Anything final for the board before we go to public comment?
Just,
Oh, Nancy, you had a
Mr.
couple
Frieda,
things, sorry.
if you're going to be providing us the information about these other towns, if you could also provide us with the additional information, so then it becomes a real apples-to-apples comparison, not just the percentage of the fund balance, but also the other factors in which we might be superior to some of these other towns, so that you can see, okay, we're better here, perhaps we're a little bit lower here, perhaps we're equivalent here.
So the way that would work is that we're gonna post on the website the report. But as far as the comparative analysis on the fund balance, we're gonna get that not from S&P 500, we have to get that from the different municipalities. The different municipalities are not gonna share with us what they're doing on economic development or their strengths and weaknesses. We're not gonna have access to their, I don't believe, to their AAA report. But we'll publish our report, we'll come in with those comparisons in terms of, the comparisons meaning the different AAA municipalities, what their respective fund balances are.
Right.
Or their memorialized policies.
But then we're only looking at one piece of the puzzle, right? You understand?
Because that's the only piece that we have an Achilles heel on. Everything else, we're very strong here.
So if we're superior in all of the other regards, and we continue to get a AAA rating, then the argument is a little bit weaker.
No, the argument is they're stronger because they're telling us, they told us point blank, the fund balance has to move up. We're AAA rated because of everything else we're
Yes,
doing here.
yes,
But
and
I'm
I
trying to
think that's
explain
good.
here that we've got to get the fund balance up because we're going to be potentially in jeopardy on the AAA rating. So if we look at economic development as being superior, and we look at fund balance being inferior, they want both. But the way we present the town sort of carries us through on the AAA side, because we focus in on the financial management practices that we do here every day. We focus in on the economic development. We focus in on cybersecurity upgrades, which they like. The pension, we've got all that straightened out after a clerical error a couple of years ago. So it's the fund balance. They're telling us you are low in terms of peer group comparison.
And economic development could flag. We could have a year where it
Right.
gets softer for a whole variety of reasons, right? And then we'd lose that foundation, right?
That's exactly right, Tim.
Nancy, you did say earlier you had one or two things you reminded me at the beginning.
Yes, actually, Mr. Frieda addressed one of them, so thank you very much for addressing the summary of the bond rating meeting. My other two requests is, one, I was wondering if Mr. Frieda might be able to ask perhaps Tammy or work with Val to give us an update on the spreadsheet that you gave us for the ARPA funding, because in looking at some of the items that we just included in the town meeting, I think some of the things were shifted from this list to, some of the catch-all categories of bonded projects, such as the senior center vans and things like that. So if we could just get an update on that, that would be really helpful, so that we know what has been spent, what hasn't been spent, and whether there are any categories that have been eliminated.
We can do that,
That
because
would
we
be
did
great.
shift some things. We'll do that.
Terrific. And then again, related to that same town meeting that took place back on September 18th, again, where there was a total amount, if you include all of the various projects that were listed in that meeting, we're talking about a total amount of bonds somewhere in the neighborhood of $17 million. But the way that that's going to be approached, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Frieda, is for each individual project, there has been an application submitted for a grant. If, in fact, we receive the grant, then we will initiate the bond for that particular project that will cover the entire amount. Once it's completed, we will receive the reimbursement for that portion from the granting agency. In some cases, we will have matching. In some cases, we will also have to pay for those expenses not covered for by either the grant or our matching. And so in the end, the hope is, once it's all said and done, we should be facing about $6 million.
5.9, yes.
$5.9 million, $5,910,000 in total debt for these various projects. But it's not the case that you're going out and initiating $17 million worth of debt. You're waiting for each one of these grants to come. Some you already have, correct?
That's not necessarily true.
Well, it's not necessarily true, but in the end, the $5,910,000 is what our debt expenditures are. So, like, I'll take, out of that 17 million that we presented, 5.7 is Temple Pines for the 30 units on 555 Pool Road.
Exactly.
That money is gonna come in before any construction starts. So there's 5.7 right off of that total number right there. Some of the other ones that have grants attached, the grants come in after the fact. We reimburse ourselves if we start the construction and start doing the work. So consider it this way. In my corporate business career, we had a $15 million line of credit, a revolving line of credit. So I would, as a CEO, tap into it when we needed it. On the books, it showed 15 million. And by the way, I'd have to sign personally for that. So, but we never really borrowed 15 million. We would tap into it, and then we would, through cash, pay that portion back. So on the books, it looks larger than it actually is going to be.
So for example, the Temple Pines, we already have the money, but we still have to take out $5.7 million in debt?
I think what happened here, Nancy, was it was recommended we pass the resolution for the entire amount. There, in some cases, we are going to have to put the dollars out and get reimbursed in the manner Mike mentioned. So we're going to have to float a ban, a short-term note, essentially, to cover us until the grant money gets in. But there was a whole lot of different projects there.
Yes.
And Mike just mentioned the biggest one. Unfortunately, there, it sounds like we're not going to have to float a ban to cover the grant portion. We're going to have it up front.
That's really the way it works, folks.
So I guess my request is, since this is going to take place over a period of time, I was wondering if you could provide us perhaps quarterly updates on, this project, we got the grant, it's been put out to bid, the project is complete, we've received the grant, and, now only this amount is remaining, in terms of the debt. Just some sort of a summary for each one of these, I think it's 8 projects, as to where we stand.
Yeah, I have no problem doing that.
That would be great. That's all I'm asking for. Terrific. Thank you.
Jim, just,
Michael?
yeah, just to finish up on the, on fund balance, I've been around for a lot of years, and I really thought that Years ago, we were working between 6 and 7%. But it's nice that we got it up to almost 9%. And the question is, can rating agencies or can, within the finance department, can we somehow be accredited for any reserve accounts that we may have, such as the Board of Ed medical expense reserve account?
Well, don't forget, the general fund consists of more than just, the 8.3% that Mike is on about is the unrestricted, uncommitted portion. So if you go into our CAFR, Mike, our total general fund reserves are higher.
Yes.
But they only really pay attention to the part that's unrestricted, because it's not free money, but it's money that we can spend in case of an emergency, in case we had a budget shortfall, and so on. If the monies are committed, it falls into a different category. So, I think if we had the CAFR, we could quote the full fund balance and what that is as a percent, but we tend to talk about the unreserved, non-committed
But if the
portion.
greatest risk to the town may be self-insurance, and
Well, that's,
then to have that money set aside has got to be reducing our overall risk, where maybe other towns may not be doing that sort of thing.
I'm not sure that's the only, but you said that's the greatest risk. I mean, there's all kinds of risks to this town. I mean, look, Mike just mentioned cybersecurity. We know lots of towns who've been, and businesses have been hit by cyber attacks, right? Sometimes it's ransom that has been paid. Sometimes it's the cost of
All right, well, I don't know if it's our
fixing things,
greatest risk, but it's a significant exposure.
Right, no, it is, yeah.
well, we did present the fact that we have high reserves in workman's comp, in self-insured, medical. So that was a positive in the rating call. But it keeps coming back up, the fund balance.
Okay. All right, then, there's no other special funds or anything we can go and turn into unrestricted funds?
We had the debt service reserve, but we kind of exhausted those, I think,
Don't
right?
get used.
Well, let me
Years
comment.
ago, we shut down, I think, about 22 special funds.
Yes. So let me comment, through this great 3.93 interest rate we received, we will accumulate $235,000 to $239,000 in premium. So that's cash back to the municipality, to us. So that could conceivably go into a debt reserve fund and build that back up again. But I'll just leave it with this, ladies and gentlemen. I think the real key is, in next year's budget, if there's a way, we do not borrow or utilize $1,670,000 from the fund balance, or the 1.17 million. If we can
Agreed,
glean
agreed.
off of that,
Well,
and
that's a step in the right
and I
direction.
can show the rating agency
That's,
how I see this.
that would make sense. Yeah, which is why the move made in this past year, and past 2 years, to use other funds in substitution for what was budgeted to come out of the unrestricted fund balance, I think that's a positive.
We've talked, Ingrid and I have had a conversation, Rich and I have had a conversation, and that's how we see it, and that's the way that I think the best way to do it. But look, the good news, folks, is we live AAA for another year.
Magic Mike.
Thank you, Mike and Mike. All right, I think we're ready to go to public comment. Any members in the audience like to address the board? Mr. Katz, please come forward.
Lou was here for some reason.
Mike, I haven't seen you in such a long time, I had to come. And I wanted to see if you came in on time.
We missed it.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. By not using some of our,
Mr. Katz, I don't mean to interrupt, just.
Sherman Katz, Sherwood Drive,
Thank
North
you.
Haven.
Go right ahead.
Sorry. By not using some of our surplus for the next year's budget, that could increase our mill rate if we,
Well, that's a possibility, Sherm, but unless we can jump the revenue through economic development to offset the utilization of fund
Yeah.
balance.
and we're slowly running out of land for economic development
I know.
because of you. So,
I'm part of the problem.
yeah, I'm proud of that, but, at some point, you're not gonna have all the land available to people that wanna come in here. I'm glad to see you got somebody down for the, what's that street that, goes to Amazon through the back?
Oh, Valley Service Road, yes.
Yeah, you have someone coming in there pretty soon.
Two companies coming in. yes.
Okay, great. The school bus, called M&J Bus, I could have all bad information right now, but I am under the impression that they have been given extensions on their contract for a number of years. I don't have any problem with the bus company, but if that's true, have we violated our charter? I mean, and it's several $1 million a year, I believe, for the bus company.
Now, I'm not aware that there's been extensions. There actually have been more issues that they're going back and forth with that have now become legal issues. And the bus drivers, each individual bus driver, and Sherm, you were in this business, you know, you were a bus monitor for years. These bus drivers that are driving these buses are outstanding. They do a great job. But there's a shortage of bus drivers, which has created schedules that aren't being met, children being late because, you know, there's the bus routes, there's not enough drivers. I'm not aware of any extensions, but we'll check it out.
And if every student had a seat on the bus, we'd be in worse shape. We have high school kids that drive to school,
Yeah.
but we have to provide a seat for them on the bus. I want to ask you about the budget workshops, Mr. Chairman. Are you going to allow public questions or comments at the budget workshops?
That has not been our past practice, Sherm. It's a workshop, it's
Excuse me,
not.
that was the chairman's practice, not the board's. He stated it was his plan, plan. What is your plan?
I hadn't considered it, Sherm, but I guess my plan would be we would not have changed what we've been done in prior years.
Okay. So if you have people in the audience that have good questions, they're not going to be able to bring them up, even though you may benefit from some of the questions and answers. Because I know you're very skilled people, you're 7 skilled people, but you have hundreds of people in the town that are skilled that may have some really good input. It's almost a rhetorical question.
Yep.
Talk about these special funds for emergencies, insurance, special ed, which I was associated with to some degree. And, you know, going back in time, Mike, to business careers, you don't usually build up special funds by allowing the budget to be increased, to have special funds. If you can't budget properly, then there's something wrong. You do have emergencies, you do have problems. And that's what this town is for. If you have they have a problem where a special situation comes up, it goes before the town to vote on. And usually the town goes along with most of these things, if they're reasonable.
You know, Mr. Katz, having sat in this board myself for many years, I can tell you that, speaking of the workshops, you know, the special ed budget is always a topic that consumes quite a bit of the Board of Ed presentation. And one of the things that always comes up is the difficulty in budgeting for special ed, because it's highly vulnerable to kids that come in district, say, after the budget session, right? So, you know, there's been lots of years where that particular item goes high because we got in 5 or 10 more kids, and special ed is unfortunately more expensive than it costs to educate and non-special ed students. So, you know, it makes sense in that case because in a way it smooths out the budget process, right? Because in some years, if you've got a budget surplus, you can hold those dollars aside. Some of the other special funds are the, you know, the insurance reserves. I mean, we're self-insured now, you know that.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's what they call a tail on these claims, right? Meaning, you know, if we decided at the end of the next fiscal year we didn't like we didn't like self-insurance, we want to go back to the old-fashioned way and just get Anthem to insure us, well, we're still subject to the claims that arose prior to then that we'd have to pay. And that's the reason that you've got reserves It's to pay those so-called tail claims were they to arise at some point in the future. So there are good and sound financial reasons that we've got some of these reserves.
And Tim and Sherman, workman's comp, right? So about 9 years ago, we looked at our workman's compensation premium. It was $1 million a year. So I asked Ed, I said, let's do a 5-year look back on what the claims were against the $1 million premium, $350,000 to $500,000. So what we did back then is that we eliminated the $1 million in the budget that was from an insurance carrier for workman's comp. And we dropped that first year by about $500,000. Save $500,000 in that budget, and that was our self-insured number. But as time goes on, you want to build up reserves because now you're self-insured. If that gets wiped out, you've got at least reserves. And that's good, sound fiscal management in government. And coming back to the rating agencies, they like that because they see you've got reserves for what we call volatility, unpredicted volatility.
Do you have a cap on how much you would have in that kind of reserve throughout the town?
Well,
It could be anything. It could be $1 million, it could be $100 million.
So the way it works, Sherman, we'll work with the different brokers that we have, and we'll look at the trend on claims history. And then we'll make a decision for that following year's budget as to what we think the reserve should be. And it could vary year by year.
Okay, so you don't have a cap where you say, okay, the surplus is where we should, the most it should be, and we don't want to go higher for another year. You continue
Well,
building
no, that would
surplus.
come into play. We would look
That
at
would?
that. It would, yeah.
Okay.
It would.
I don't know who to ask this question of, but I remember a number of years ago, the federal government set a guideline, or actually it was a regulation. Do you have any regulations for temperature settings in the buildings that are operated by the town? What's your lowest in the summer, what's your highest in the winter? Because I walked into some of the buildings where you need a fur coat in the summer, and we have a big bill in this town. I mean, it's not a nickel dime operation anymore. You have lights.
Yeah.
Some places have gone to the lights where once you leave the room for 2 minutes or 30 seconds, the lights go off.
Yeah.
I know it's expensive to install, but with the amount of electricity and oil and so on that we use.
I think it's a good point. I think we can do a better job on that. And in the case of Town Hall here, because the system's so antiquated with different zones, if it's cold up here, it's hot down there. If it's hot down there, it's cold up here. So you got competing interests in the different floors. This is why part of the bonding package was to put a new HVA system here. Once that happens, I think we can get to where you're looking, what you're referring to, Sherman.
And coming back to the schools with the air conditioning, I use the Veterans Administration, and they have installed air conditioning into that building, in a building that didn't have it before. And they do it in such a way that they don't have to run fabulous ducts and everything all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure we have a company that we deal with that can look into a reasonable.
Let me answer.
Go ahead, yeah.
Okay, so I've asked the superintendent and the business manager to go out and do an analysis of the elementary schools. Those are the primary issues.
Yeah.
And they're going to come back to us with, they're going to hire a consultant. And they're going to come back to us with recommendations as to how to improve those elementary schools from an HVAC standpoint. This board will see those recommendations, because if it ends up that it has to go to a bonding package, then we have to go through the processes of government. So we started the process in terms of them doing the analysis, Sherman.
I have a question for you, if I may. When an invoice comes in for something that was purchased by the town, what is the paperwork procedure for passing that along to you for payment?
We have to get a purchase order. The departments have to get a purchase order request, they get approved, and once each department, they get their invoices themselves, they'll send it to the finance office for payment.
And you get proof
And
of
then we have
delivery on the items, or? That it was delivered to the town?
Yes, everything has to supply, yes, the delivery, the packing list, the supervisor.
So the normal
department
business
head
procedure.
signature, yes.
Now, do you have any restrictions or limitations on purchase orders? Can something be purchased without a purchase order?
We don't, no, we don't purchase without purchase order, unless it's a contract.
Okay. Thank you. I think that's all I'm going to talk about. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Katz. Anyone else in the audience care to ask a question? All right, I will accept the motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
The preceding program is brought to you in part through a grant from the town of North Haven. Watch town meetings or other videos on demand at nhtv.com.